So what we're going to be talking about first, what are referred to as lists. You can give me a in the real world. Gustavo, what's it? What's okay? So give me a list of 3 cars.
Mustang, Charger, Corvette.
Okay, and these are cars you own. Okay, because I'm coming over to your house. We're gonna have a little party. Okay, that's funny. You know, I like those are more likely cars you want to own, right? Okay. All the cars that I've owned, they would be Volvo. That's just, how many people are in a family that's like a car family? Like everybody in your family has the same car. You're like that? What's the car?
Well, it's a brand. It's like Ford or Chevy. That's it.
Ford or Chevy. That's all you have. And Louis, you raise your hand.
Toyota.
Toyota. All Toyotas and
Chevy.
Chevy. Okay. Yeah, we used to be a Volkswagen family, and we had back before time. We had a little, one of those original Volkswagens, the little sort of egg-shaped ones. And then we got a Volkswagen van. And those things, I don't know if you know, but those things are really valuable nowadays. I mean, like, if somebody fixes up like a 1960s Volkswagen van, it goes for like $10,000, $20,000, It's the shell itself, because I tried to buy one recently, and so I could put the engine in and everything. The shell itself can be like $1,000 with nothing in it, But anyway, my mom, we went camping in one of those, and my mom got in an accident in the van, and it totaled the van, and so she switched over to Volvo because it's a safer car, and we've been driving those ever since. But a list is, in the real world here, is a list of any type of things that you want to list. Like, for example, for cars, it could be Volvo and Chevy and Toyota. Okay? Now, if we're talking about web design, there's 2 ways to look at a list. A list can still be a list of items that appear on a website. Okay? So, for example, you could have a website that lists the top 10 people who ran the Tucson Marathon, right? And then it would just list their names. Okay? But there's a different kind of list that has to do more with HTML and CSS inside of websites. And that's the list we're going to talk about tonight. Does anybody have any idea what the lists in HTML are mainly used for? It's a functional thing. What they're used to build. You had the little spastic hand up and then down again. Like, was that like, maybe I know, can I give a partial answer? Navigation is correct, sir. I wish I had a prize. I wish there was a young lady with a prize that could march it over to you. That's correct. So lists are the backbone of navigation, and navigation, another word for navigation, is a menu, right? So the menus that we make in web design are lists, essentially. So if we were to look at our Project 1 files and look at this navigation menu over here, at its core, it is essentially a list. It's a list of items. Item 1, Item 2, Item 3, Item 4, Item 5, coupled with CSS, cascading style sheet styles, that give it all of its attributes. Background color, the size, the padding, the color of the font, and so on and so forth, right? Now, we took the easy route when we made Project 1. We went to Listomatic. Aha, Listomatic. We went to Listomatic and got navigation menu code. We dropped it in, and we were done, right? But we're going to go a little deeper tonight. Instead of just like getting in the Chevy and driving it off, we're going to open the hood. We're going to get our hands dirty. We're going to learn how to build a list from scratch. And instead of building this list, which we've talked about is a sub-navigation list, a vertical list that sits on the side, we're going to learn how to build a list, a horizontal list, that goes across the top here, which is something that you see much more often in web design. Okay? Now, in the process of doing this, we're going to kind of mess this picture up a little bit, just for the sake of, just for expediency and for time, but you can always come back and create a smaller picture if you want. Okay? So that's the process we're going to do. We're going to make a list, and we're going to go ahead and do that together right now. So the first thing I need you to do is go to your split screen so that you can see the front end of your website on one side, and on the split screen on the left side, I want you to make sure that you have this source code button clicked so we're seeing the HTML. Now, let me just give you fair warning. If you look up on the screen and you see stuff in gray on my screen that's not on yours, it's because it's this demo I'm about to show you. And by the time we're done, you guys will have this all typed in. So don't worry about that. What you guys have right now, up here, I have it around line 10, line 11, is you have a div called a header, and then you have either an image dropped in right there, or you have a background image there, right? We did background images last week, right? So you guys may have dropped in as a background image, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to, as I said, we're going to create a navigation menu, a horizontal menu, and what we're going to do is we're going to carve out some space here in the header. We're going to carve out 30 pixels for the navigation menu, which means that this top header, instead of being 100 pixels high, we're going to shrink its height to 70 so that we can fit the extra 30 pixels of our menu in. So the first thing we're going to do, the first thing I'd like you guys to tell me is, do all of you have, in your header, do you have an image stuffed into your header like this anymore, or is it all background images?
My header is now behind the div.
Your image is behind the div.
Right.
Okay, so that's fine. Don't worry about that if that's the case. In my case, I'm going to do one thing here because my image is not behind the div. I'm going to crush my image. Instead of making its height 100, I'm going to make it 70. This is something you guys do not need to do if your image is behind the div. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to make my image height 70, and what you're going to see over here on mine is you're going to see my image crunch up a little bit. Like I said, you guys won't need to do that because you're going to have to do something a little different. Okay, so so I just crunched that image up to give me room right there so that I could put in my menu. But you guys are going to need to do something a little different. You're going to need to go over to your style sheet. So up here at the top, click on Style. Come down to your header, and where you see # header, and where it says height, I need you to change that to 70. The height should be 70 pixels in your header. Now I want to see what happens when you guys do that. So go ahead and click over here. Okay, so now let me see what your background image looks like. Let's see. Background image is that, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so like I said, remember I said initially that it's going to jack up your image that's back there? Don't worry about that for now. You guys can go back in, take your image and shrink it down so that it's 70 pixels high. Right now it's 100 pixels high, and so it's getting cut off because we stole 30 pixels from it. Do not worry about that, right? Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make a new div that we're going to put in right underneath this header div, which is going to hold our menu. So I need you to go back to the source code by clicking that button at the top left, and I need you to go after the div that's called header. I need you to click at the end of that div and hit your return button, and I need you to type, create a new div, and this is what it's going to look like. Div ID equals menu. So you want to create that, and then you want to create a enddiv tag. Yours will be sitting right up here with nothing in it. Yours will be sitting right up here with nothing in it. Okay. So now what we've done, we've got our header tag, we've shrunk it down, both, in my case I shrunk it down here, in your case you shrunk it down in the CSS, I had to do it in both places. And now we've created a new div called menu, which is sitting right underneath the header div. Now we have to give that menu some attributes. We have to give that div some attributes so that it will actually show up on our website, because right now we've created a div with basically no attributes, no rules, no styles, so we don't see anything, right? Now let me give you fair warning of the fact that the complexity of our style sheet is about to go up several degrees, okay? When you make a menu, it's not as simple as just saying, okay, I'm making a new style menu, and there it is, there's my menu, I'm done, right? Menus have many different levels of interaction, okay? For example, a menu, you can see a menu just sitting on a page. Like if I were to go to this design view here and click my live button, so that now I'm in sort of a website preview, menus have several different stages, right? There's what you might call the up state, which is these buttons, if you will regard them as that, just sitting there, right? And then there's what's called the over state, which is what happens when you roll your mouse over it. And look, something changes, right? The colors change, the background color changes. So that means that our menu is going to have at least a couple of different styles that apply to it, right? Now, you might think, okay, maybe two styles, like an upstate and an overstate. Well, it's actually more complex than that. The menu that we're going to do actually is going to have four different styles, at least four styles associated with it. There's going to be one style that's associated with the menu as a whole. And that is for this whole list of items, this whole list of menu items, so you can take it as one whole thing and move it up or down, right? Or sideways, or whatever you need to do with the whole menu. That's one style, right? The next style will be what's called list items, which are these items right here. It's just going to affect those items and how far they are from the top and what color the background is, right? The third style is going to be if they're links. If each one of these is a link that goes to another page, there's going to be a style associated with that. Is it going to have an underline, or is it not going to have an underline as a link? What color is it going to be if it's a link? And finally, the fourth style is going to be the overstate if it is a link. So what happens when you put your mouse over it and it changes, color, right? So that's just giving you a little fair warning that we're going to create at least four styles for this menu that we're making. All right, so let me go back to my split screen view. What we've done is in the source code, we've created a div, id equals menu, and you guys put your div tag over here like this, so it looks like that, right? What we're going to do now is click up here on the style.css, scroll down, and underneath your header, I want you to make a style called menu. Now I'm just going to move my little, with any luck at all, move this thing down here, almost. One more, oof, and this. Okay, so you want to make this style right here, # menu. All right? And let's go ahead and let's all put in these same attributes, a background color of #000, which is what color?
White.
Black? Okay. What is white? Very good. Very good. So white is FFF, black is 000. The height is going to be 30, which is exactly the amount of space we carved out because we had 100 with the header, but we made 170, so we've got 30 left over. And the width is 960, which is exactly the width of this bad boy. So # menu, which means ID menu, and we're basically just making a section for the menu to live in. So actually, if I think about it, that I think will be a fifth style. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. So we're actually going to make a total of 5 styles. One of them is just carving out a section for them to live in, the menu to live in, and that's called menu. Okay, so let's see what we got. So when you're done with that, your top of your website should look like this now. We got that?
No.
Nope, we don't have that. Oh, let me go back to the code. You're like, well, how can we do it if you took away the code? Okay, let me walk around. Anybody that's having an issue, raise a hand and I'll. Okay.
So, major.
Okay, so the problem here is that this sidebar is not below. Okay, you didn't give your menu a end div. Probably because you didn't see one up there from me. There you go. Okay, let's see what's going on over here. So, you didn't finish typing it yet? Okay, so, so it'd be, background, black, height is 30 pixels, and width is 960 pixels. And then we close it with a curly bracket. And yeah, same thing. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. This. There we go. Okay, who else? Anybody else? Raise a hand, raise it high.
Oh, it had it, that's not bad.
No, that's not black. We'll just change that to 00. And let's see, source code. Okay, this. Okay, so what you need to do is this menu needs to be up above the menu, like that. There you go. Okay, don't worry about that little guy. Come on. Okay, how we doing? Everybody good? Everybody golden? Loving life? Okay, good. Okay, so now we have a big black box there, which is going to be our menu area, right? So now, and like I said, there's 5 different styles that are here, and each one kind of lives inside the one before it and is more specific. So it gets a little confusing. So I'm going to try and go over this a couple times just to try and get it into your heads here. And after you've done it on your own, it'll start to make a little more sense. So the first style we made is called menu, and it's literally just a big box, just a div that's going to hold. It's the menu area. Okay. The next style we're going to make is going to be called my menu. Now, before we make that style, here on the style sheet, we're going to go back to our source code. Now, this is not unusual for web design, flipping back and forth between the HTML web page and the CSS. Because remember, the HTML is where you build the house, right? So it's kind of like if you're the if we have a client and we're the contractor, right? The web designer is the contractor, and the client comes to us and they say, you know, we love the design of the house that you made, you know, with the front door and the living room and the foyer and the kitchen and the photography room and the billiards room and the giant indoor pool, right? We love that house that you made, right? But we just decided that we have a lot of extra money, and what we want to do is we want to make a sunroom right up here at the top, right? That's like kind of like adding this new addition, like this menu section in here, right? And so you're like, okay, no problem. We'll just create a new section, a new div, a new container, or I'm sorry, a new div box, and we'll put it up here underneath your header, and that will be, you know, your sunroom, right? So that's what happens. You go to your HTML and you create a div which is going to hold this content that you want, and then you bring in the interior designers, which is the CSS, and you jump over here to the CSS style page and you decorate it the way you want it to be. Okay, so in order to put something inside of this container, this little div that we just made, we're going to have to go over here to the HTML and we're going to have to create a new little thing. In this case, it's not going to be a div. It's going to be something slightly different. It's going to be something called a list. And that makes sense because that's what we're talking about today, right? So what I would like you to do is type this code right here on line 13. I'd like you to go, first of all, you're going to have to click in between your div ID equals menu and your end div tag. On your screen, they're going to be right next to each other. So you're going to have to click in between it and hit your return button a few times so that it pops down. And then you're going to have to type angle bracket UL, ID equals quote my underscore menu, end quote, end angle bracket. Okay? So just type this top part here, this line here. Now when you're done, actually let's have you type let's have you type it so that you have these 4 lines right here, 12 through 15. Okay, so you should have div ID equals menu. A couple lines down, you have the closing div tag, and between that you have UL ID equals my menu, and then a closing UL tag. Now don't worry about any of this stuff from 16 to 20 just yet. We'll get to that. Just trying to build it one piece at a time. Okay, so we built a menu area, div ID menu, and then inside there we're going to build another little section which I've already told you is going to be a list. Okay? Now, we've talked about the fact that in web design, a list is a series of items that will form navigation buttons. It's a menu. Okay? So, the first thing we have to decide if we're going to make a list is what kind of a list is it going to be. And in HTML, there are 2 kinds of lists. All right? This is one kind. What kind is this? Carolyn, do you know what kind this is? Maria? You have to say something. You raised a hand. That was the cardinal sin. Just say something. It's okay if it's wrong. It's correct. It's an unordered list. An unordered list. Now, let's go back to Microsoft Word for a second, right? Now, this list that I have, this list of Volvo, Chevy, and Toyota, let me go ahead and highlight these 3 items, and let me click on this bullet thing in Word. And now I have a list, and this is actually what's called an unordered list. Okay, so this is what's called an unordered list. Now, Alicia, why is this an unordered list? Unordered.
Not in some.
Their place isn't really defined.
Because why?
Their place isn't really defined.
Exactly. The place is not really defined. If I take Chevy and I put it on top of Volvo, which I would never do because we all know that Volvo is better than Chevy. Okay, I'm just kidding. I don't want to get jumped after class by people with little Chevy hats on. If I move the order of these things, it doesn't really matter. We're just saying, hey, these are great cars, right? Okay, so that's what defines an unordered list. Unordered means there's no order. It's unordered, right? Now, if I highlight all 3 of these and I click this button, what kind of a list is it now? It's an ordered list because now the order is very important, right? Chevy's number 1, Volvo's number 2, Toyota's number 3. Okay? Now, in HTML, when we make navigation menus, which kind of list do you think we use?
Unordered.
And is that because we used an unordered list earlier? I think so.
You don't want numbers.
We don't want numbers, exactly, right? So that's why when we go back to our HTML page here, we're using the HTML code UL, which stands for unordered list, because we don't want our home button and our gallery button and our about button have big number 1, 2, 3 next to them. We just want them to be unordered, which means they have no numbers. So if you type in UL, that means you will be generating an unordered list. And then after that, you type /UL. That means that within these 2 tags here, you're going to put a list of items, and it doesn't matter what order they go in, so they won't have numbers on them. Now, what we did by putting an ID equals, quote, my underscore menu, is we gave this list a name that we can put on the CSS style sheet so we can apply attributes to it. So now let's jump back to the CSS style sheet. And let's add in the My Menu code. Okay? So go ahead and type this. So once again, we're doing an ID, which means we're only using it once.
Where are we putting that?
Look up here.
Yeah. No, but I meant.
Right, you're putting it right underneath menu. So in other words, you have
Okay.
header and then menu and then my menu. You're going to put all these right underneath the previous one that you did.
All right.
So let me explain what each of these is doing. Text align center is going to take the entire menu as a block and center it in this horizontal area. Padding 0 and margin 0 are going to zero out so you don't have any spacing around it. And padding top 7 pixels is simply going to take the text itself and move it down from the very top of this black menu area so that it's sort of sitting vertically in the center. And you'll see that in a second. Okay, so once again, this process of going to the HTML page, like going to the blueprints of the house, blocking out a room, which is a div, giving it a name like sunroom in the case of this architecture, or in the case of our HTML menu, going back to the CSS, creating the room itself, which is the div. Now we're going to put something inside of that room. In this case, it's going to be an unordered list, a navigation menu. So we create another section called an unordered list, which is going to live inside of our menu area on that page. Okay? Now, what do you guys think the next step is? We created a menu area, a box, it's going to hold our menu. We created an unordered list tags to hold a list. We're going to make a list, okay? Has everybody had enough time to type this code? Okay, let's go back to our source code page. Scroll down. And now I want you to type this code here in between your begin unordered list and your end unordered list tag. And I would like you to use your tab key and tab it over so that it looks just like my code here. And while you're doing that, I'll explain why. We talked earlier in the semester about how important tabbing is. Tabbing is when you take code and you tab it in so that there's an indentation on the left side. What you'll see here is on line 12, you'll see the div ID menu. It starts at a certain level relative to the left side. And then if we look down at the bottom of that section, the closing div tag is in the same sort of plane, vertical plane, as the opening tag. So we can see, oh, the div starts here and ends here, right? But then we indent a little, we tab in, and the unordered list starts inside of the div and then ends inside of the div. That's what these tabs represent, that this item is inside of this item. Furthermore, we tab in again, and now we have these items called LI, which stands for what? Michael, what does LI stand for? Any idea? Okay. Someone else? Omar?
List all.
It's LI. You're close. You're half there. List.
This.
List.
Identify. This.
Item.
Item.
List item. Okay? So basically, each one of these objects is a list item. So begin list item, close list item. So each one of the menu items is a list item. Okay? And each one of them is going to be a link, which is why we have this green code here, which says href equals #. It's to make each one of these list items a link. Now, when you're finished typing this code, over here on the front side of your web page, you'll actually see the list appear as a vertical list with bullet points in front of it, which is how an unordered list appears when you first create it. And when you type in this green code here, which makes them all links, you'll see each one underlined, and it will appear blue on your page, which is the default way that a link appears on a website. Okay, so once again, we created the area, which is the menu, and then we created a general style called My Menu, which is going to hold the entire unordered list of elements, which is basically all your menu items. And so now that we have My Menu, which is this list of text items, we can take that and we can move it around and do whatever we want with the list as a whole. How we doing? Everybody got that typed?
No. Halfway.
Okay, I'll give you another second. Now, we're trying to create a horizontal menu, but this is vertical, correct? So one of the things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to make it horizontal. So, you know, I told you that we were going to create 5 different styles just to create this one menu. And so far we've created how many? 2, right? We've created the menu area, the black box, and we've created the My Menu, which is the list of items, right? There's 3 more that we're going to create, 3 more styles. And what's going to happen with these styles is each one is going to be a version of the style before it, but a little more specific. You guys know what Russian nesting dolls are? Okay, Anna, what are Russian nesting dolls?
They're like 7 or 8 dolls that fit.
Yeah, they're like sort of, I don't know, peanut-shaped dolls that fit inside of each other, right? And they nest inside each other. When something goes inside something else, it's called nesting, right? Well, in CSS, you could create sort of nested styles, which are styles that live inside of the style before it, and each style gets a little more specific. Just like with the Russian dolls, every time you open it, there's a new doll in there and it gets a little smaller. In HTML and CSS, you can take styles, like you can take a style like My Menu, and you can say, okay, My Menu applies to the entire menu, but what if I want a style that just applies to a single list item, to any one of these list items? Well, I can take My Menu and add an LI to it as a style, and now it's like a Russian nesting doll. It is just one item inside My Menu, it's just one list item, right? So that's actually what we're going to do now. We're going to go back to our style sheet, style.css. We're going to go underneath My Menu, and we are going to type a new style called #my_menu space li. Okay, so you should see it right here on my screen on line 35.
My Menu again. My Menu.
You're going to have to go underneath the My Menu style that you just typed. You're going to have to type #my menu again, and now do a space and then li. So this is a more specific style. This is saying, if you are a list item inside of My Menu, I want this stuff applied to you. Okay? Now the first thing that we're applying is something called display::inline. What do you think that's going to do? What's that? It's going to make it horizontal. And what it's literally saying is, since the default of a list is to be vertical, it's going to say, instead of displaying it like, you know, one on top of another, it's almost, if you cut this into 2 words, they're literally saying display in a line. In other words, if there were a line, a horizontal line going across, take each one of these words and move it up so that it will be in a line going across. So when you're done typing this code, if you click back over into this screen, you should see these guys all pop into a line. And they would be sitting right next to each other unless you added some padding, which is some spacing, to the right and the left. And that's what this padding is. There's 4 numbers here. And the way that the padding works is that you can take any object, and any object has a top side, a right side, a bottom, and a left side. And if you go to padding and you use 4 numbers, the first number represents the top, the second number represents the right, the third number represents the bottom, and the fourth number represents the left side. So that means we want no space on the top. We want 40 pixels on the right, no space on the bottom, and 40 pixels on the left, which will mean that when you line these guys up, there's going to be 40 pixels on either side of each item so that they spread out across your page. Now, by the way, this little model that I've drawn on the whiteboard here of top, right, left, bottom, it always starts up here at the top and moves in a clockwise fashion around. So it's always TRBL. One way to remember that is to use this acronym here, the word trouble. Top right, bottom left. And this little model here works for both padding and margin. You can put up to 4 numbers in there, and it also works for borders. Right? So any of those numbers will apply to that. Yes, Aaron.
Notice we don't put PX after zeros, just save space.
Correct. Yeah, 0 means nothing, so it doesn't matter if there's a PX after it. What?
You can do it either way.
Yes, you can. Okay, how are we doing? Has everybody got that typed? Okay, so if I click over here in my screen, now what I see, and what you should see too, is that the list items line up in a line. Display in line is what we said. They're all links, which means they're blue and they have underlines in them. And they all have 40 pixels to the right and the left, which spreads them out across the page. And they're also centered because back when we did the menu command, which is this one right here, when we did the My Menu command, we said text align center, which means take the whole menu and center it. Now, I don't expect you guys to like look at all this code and go, oh, you know, perfect, makes perfect sense, I get it. I can now write this from memory. It takes a little while. Hopefully you're understanding what's going on, but it takes a little while of doing this to understand it. Yes?
Okay, I didn't do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Mine didn't go horizontal.
Okay. So let's see. Why not? It's usually just one little grammatical thing. Okay. Okay, let's go over here. So let's do Oh, you spelled. It's one letter.
I know.
Yeah, it's crazy. HTML is insane. It's like if you make one
I know,
mistake,
it would
it's
take
like, you know,
hours to find it.
it's like they're gonna shoot you if you make one mistake. Are you still doing it?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Question? Okay.
I'm center, but it's not in line.
Okay, you can see right there that you've got an error. See that little A? So what that means is that you forgot right here, you typed a comma instead of this beginning tag here. And so, okay, that should solve one problem. Oh, you did more than one. You did it on all of them.
Yeah, copy paste.
Okay, well that's generally a good idea. And of course you can see the downside, which is the error that you're. Okay. Okay, so we got all those, right? Now we go to the style sheet and.
Where's line supposed to be?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. That was exactly the thing. There you go. Okay, you guys. I know I usually give you a break around quarter after, but we're gonna finish this in 5 minutes, and then you guys will take your break. Okay?
And that's what it shows.
And by the way, you know, I feel your pain because I take classes here too. And last night it was 7:30 on a Monday night, and I was sitting there in my short story class, and I saw everybody in the class like looking up the clock, and their faces were like this. And 7:30 is when our teacher gives us our break, and that is you know biblical to us, right? We're like 7:30 on the dot, give us our break, right? And she kept talking, man. She talked to like 5 to 8, and I was like, I was going to have an intervention, you know? I was like, we need our break. So I'm very sensitive to that. So, but hopefully you guys understand that teachers just get caught up in what they're doing and forget about things like that. So 5 minutes, we'll be there, okay? So everybody's there, everybody's got their horizontal list going across the top, right? Okay, now we are no longer going to go back and jump over to our HTML page because now we have all the objects in place over there. I'll just jump over there and once to show you. Now we've got the structure in place. We've got the black box, which is the menu area, and we've got the unordered list, which is my menu, and we've got all the menu items, and we've got them as links. So now we've got all the structure. Now we're just hanging out on the style sheet here, and we're simply adding attributes and styles to what's already there. So we have a menu, and we have a my menu, and now we have the third style, which is my menu list item, which is each of these individual items now has style applied to it so that it's in a line and it has padding on either side, right? The next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a new style, which is going to apply if any of these list items is in fact a link. Okay? So now we're going to go one step further. We're going to say, if you are in the My Menu unordered list, and you're a list item, and you're a link, which is represented by the letter A, then we want to apply some more styles to you. In this case, text decoration none, which means we're going to get rid of the line underneath the links. That's what's called a text decoration. And also, we're going to change the color to Molly's favorite color, which is FFF, right? Which means that when we're done with this, that this text up here will look more presentable. It won't have lines under it, and it will be white instead of blue, which means it will be high contrast against the black and easier to see. So this is our fourth style. Now it's not unusual to create this many styles or more just to properly format a menu so that it has all the list items and you can control every aspect of it that you want to. And that's what we're doing with these sort of Russian nesting dolls of styles, is we're going deeper and deeper and deeper into the item itself so that we can literally get control over the smallest element of it. And that's what's great about CSS. It allows you to control big things, like the entire background of the website, and it also lets you narrow down and specify and drill down to the smallest little item and affect that attribute as well. Okay, so when you're done typing that style, if you click over on the right-hand side, you'll see that your text is now white and the underline is removed.
And if it's not?
And what?
And if it's not?
And if it's not, then...
We typed something wrong.
Right. Let's see. Where are you? Okay.
Isn't it all this?
Oh, yeah, but... That's it. See what I did?
I thought that one had
No, that was exactly it a second ago, Catherine. But what this is, this little / with a star, that's called a comment. And what happens is anything between that and then a star / turns gray and is not actually having any effect on the page, right? So what you're seeing is that what I'm doing is I had written all the code beforehand, but I have the section that you haven't typed yet commented it out, so it's not yet being applied.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
so
kept
you had
copying it,
that
thinking
commented
it was
out, which is why it
part
wasn't
of it.
applying. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So now the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to go one step further. This will be our final step. We're now going to say, if you're in the My Menu list, and you're a list item, and you're a link, and somebody is rolling over you, which is called the hover command. If somebody's hovering over you, then we want you to have the line appear again, the one that we got rid of before, and we want your color to change. So let's go ahead and type this final style. Now, by the way, you can use all of this code in whatever projects you're doing. There's no shame in cutting and pasting and reusing code. That's what it's for. So you can even take your project 1 and rebuild it into something different and make it part of project 2. Okay, so now we're saying that if you're a menu item, if you're a list item, if you're a link, and if somebody rolls over you, we want the underline to appear, and we want your color to change to sort of a green-yellow, yellow-green color. So now, if you,
Can't see
sorry,
text declaration underline.
I'll give you guys a second to finish typing that. When you're done typing it, click on your design button here so you can see your whole page, and then click the live button, and then roll your mouse over the navigation items. And you'll see that they change color and an underline appears, which is exactly what we told them to do. Did you guys get that to work? Okay, good. Okay, so I'm just going to show you on mine. So if I go to Design and Live, and then roll over them, you can see that now they're changing to that yellow-green color and the underline is appearing.
What makes the underline appear?
What makes the underline appear is the fact that we say text decoration underline. Because if you recall, in the earlier one, the one right before it, we said text decoration none. That means text decoration none in this style here, which says that if they're a list item and they're a link, which is these boys right here, we don't want any lines appearing under them. But if we hover over them, we want the underline to appear, which just makes the text look a little different. Just, it's an interactive element that shows people that something's going to happen.
Oh, it works now.
Okay, is that working out for most of you guys? Steven? Oh. Now those of you, I've seen it so many times, it just becomes part of the game, and certainly I've done it. If your code is not working, look through your code with an eye to grammatical mistakes and spelling errors, okay? Because all it takes is one error, a misplaced letter, a left off semicolon, a left off curly bracket. Dreamweaver will help you by showing the code in a different color if something's wrong with it. But all it takes is one little mistake and your code won't work. And that, of course, is true of code across the board, but it's definitely true in CSS and HTML.
What about the spaces or lack of spaces?
Spacing is not really an issue. Like, in other words, if I had 30 spaces between these two styles and none,
Between, say, like the semicolon and none, or.
well, like, for example, this word none and there's a semicolon here, if I put like a bunch of space here, it's not going to break the code.
Okay.
Yeah, it just has to be at the end of the line. Space is not as much an issue. Okay, you guys have all done a great job. You are now free to go on break, and I will answer your question. And I will pause this. Okay, and I'm going to go to our website and go to the home page here. And just by way of review, if my computer chooses to cooperate, which it's not. Okay, I'm going to click on this little link, which this is something that we had seen earlier, but I'm just going to review it a little bit. Sorry, my computer's being really pokey right now. It's running off the Wi-Fi, so that's probably why. Okay, so do you guys remember this page? We looked at it, right? And so the reason I'm showing you this again is because this is what we're about to talk about. Now, the websites that we have made in this class so far, or I should say the website, the Project One, is what's called a fixed width website. So named because the width of the website was fixed to a set size, in this case 960 pixels, right? But it was also fixed in another way. What was the other measurement that was fixed? This was the width, the height. The height was fixed at 600 pixels. So this was what you might call a fixed width and a fixed height website that we made. It's sort of like sending you guys out in little bikes with trainer wheels on, right? It's like, okay, here's a box, make the box. Okay, good, you can make a box. Okay, now we're gonna take the training wheels off and let you go nuts, okay? So, most websites are not fixed width and fixed height, but it was easy to make that one that way because it's easy to learn on that. But now we can learn about how to expand those so that we can remove these features of fixed width and fixed height and instead have something called auto width, which means that it automatically expands or contracts based on a measurement which is done in percentages as opposed to pixels, okay? So there's two kinds of ways you can set, there's more than two ways that you can set the width of a website. You can say that it is a specific measurement, and then you can say that you're going to use pixels, like 960 pixels wide. Or you can say that it's a percentage, and that percentage is a percentage of the width of the browser. So you can say instead of making it 960 pixels wide, I want to make it 80% of the width of the browser. So if this is 100%, then 80% would be like 10% off each side. Okay? Now there's other units of measurement besides pixels that can be used. There's one that we're going to talk about later. It's referred to as EMS. EM. An M is a unit of measurement, and an M is a really strange unit of measurement. An M is a unit of measurement that can change based on the browser that it's in. And let me try and define that. We'll go back to M's. We're not going to talk about them right now much more than just bring them up. But what M's are, let's say that you made a browser. Let's say you were Microsoft and you made a browser, right? And you said, okay, for my Microsoft Internet Explorer browser, I'm going to make the default height of all my fonts in that browser 12 pixels. Okay? So 12 pixels is the default height of Internet Explorer's browser. So that number, which is the default height of the font, is going to equal 1M, this strange unit of measurement. Okay? Now let's say that you made a different browser. Let's say you made the Firefox browser. And you said, in Firefox, I'm going to make my default font 11 pixels high. Well, in Firefox, 11 pixels would equal 1M. So an M is a unit of measurement, one unit of which is equal to the default font size of the browser. Now, the fact that everybody who makes a browser creates their own default font size might explain why websites look slightly different when you're looking at them in Internet Explorer, Safari, Firefox, Opera, Chrome, and when you're looking at them on a Macintosh versus a PC or Linux. Okay? Everybody has their own defaults. So an M is a unit of measurement that is relative to the browser that it's in. So for example, instead of saying I wanted something to be like 960 pixels wide, I could say I wanted it to be 12 M's wide. And what would happen then is that it would be, this wide in Internet Explorer, and it might be a little smaller in Firefox, but when you looked at it in both those browsers, it would look about right because this is a proportionate unit of measurement, proportionate to the default font size in the browser. Now that's kind of a weird thing. We'll come back to it. Right now we're just talking, we're going to move on and talk about percentages because those are a little easier to wrap your head around, right? Now we talked about this screen that we have up, and we talked about the different types of websites. The kind of website that you guys made is called a static website. It's this. It has a static width, a fixed width of all the elements. So that when you take the browser and you make it smaller, you lose information because all of those elements are set in stone, right? But there's other kinds of websites here that you can make. There's one called adaptive, right? And what an adaptive website is, it means that you have an adaptive website. It means that if this website is viewed on different devices, like on a tablet or a phone, that there's going to be a different static layout for each one. So here we are in the layout for the computer, the PC desktop. When we get small enough for it to be on a tablet, it's going to change to just 2 columns, but it's still static. You know, those columns aren't changing their size. When we go down to a smaller tablet, it's all 1 column. And then when we go to the smallest window, which would be a phone, it's 1 column, but it's formatted like this. Okay, and this is the reason why we even get into percentages at all and away from static layouts, is because, you know, when you're talking about something static, you're talking about something unchanging, and that doesn't really work in today's world of multiple devices, right? Now, the next kind of layout that we have is something called a liquid layout. It's also called a fluid design. And a fluid design is characterized by scaling the width of the parts of the design relative to the window. Okay? So in other words, instead of being static, each one of these little boxes here is now being measured in percent. And so instead of saying this is 200 pixels and 600 pixels and 300 pixels, it's like this is 30%, 60% and 10% or whatever it's going to be, right? So liquid is pretty cool, except that it breaks down at a certain point. So you can see, hopefully you can see, as we get this smaller, you see this right column here? It's getting subtly less wide. Can you see? And the center column is getting less wide. Can you see that? But watch what happens when we go too far. When we go into the smallest of the small, you see how this is breaking apart and this is kind of breaking up? Okay? So liquid breaks down at a certain width, and that's no good either, right? So probably the best of these layouts is this one called responsive. And what responsive is it's the liquid layout. So once again, things are designed in percentages, but it's a series of liquid layouts that switch when it gets down to the smaller size. So we'll have a liquid layout for the PC desktop, and then when you get down to tablet size, a liquid layout for that, and also one for phone. So here's the one for the PC desktop. Now we get down to this is probably a smaller desktop. Then we get down to tablet size, but notice how everything still looks good. And finally, phone size, and everything is still looking good. Everything is just reflowing to fit the boxes. Once again, responsive design is the big buzzword and has been for several years. This is really the best way to design websites. Now, instead of just right off the bat us designing a responsive website, let's go ahead and look at one that Dreamweaver will make for us. So let's go into Dreamweaver and let us go up to the File menu at the top left and click on File and then click on the word New. And then you should get this screen right here that says New Document. Now, in your book, I believe it was last week that you were doing templates in the book, Chapter 6, and that teaches you how to make a Dreamweaver template and how to work with Dreamweaver templates. Well, Dreamweaver comes with a whole bunch of templates already pre-created for you. And these are the different templates right here. Notice that they use the word fixed, right? So like, for example, click your mouse on 3-column fixed header and footer. Down here about 3/4 of the way down. Now this is going to give you, actually let's do this. Click on 2-column fixed, what am I looking for? Okay, 2-column fixed left sidebar header and footer. Let's click on that one. Now this one right here is darn similar to what you guys just created. It's a static or fixed website with a header, a footer, a main area, and a sidebar. Obviously your sidebar could be on the right or the left, right? So Dreamweaver will make a template like that, and then you can just fill in the data, the content, right? But of course, we're trying to move away from fixed layouts, right? So we want to move into something called a liquid layout, right? Which is what we just talked about. So let's go all the way down here, the third from the bottom. and click on 3-column liquid header and footer. Now, what you see here is that there's a header, a footer, a main, and 2 sidebars. And you see that there's a little sort of curly line here in each of the sidebars. That curly thing is represented in the center too, and then there's a percentage there. Okay? And what these curlies represent, I like to think of them as like springs or rubber bands. And what they're trying to represent is that this is a liquid layout, and that like a spring, it will stretch and contract. And then it is being controlled by percentages, right? So if your total percentage that's possible is 100% of the width of the browser, then for example, you could have a 20% width on the left, a 20% width on the right sidebar, and a 60% width in the center. And then of course your header and footer might each be 100% to go all the way across. Well, since we're clicked on that right now, make sure that over here in the left column it says HTML, that is highlighted. Make sure 3-column liquid header and footer is highlighted. And then click on the Create button at the bottom right. Now, once it creates the page, click on the little globe that's at the top left of your screen here, and then click on Preview in Firefox or Safari. It's going to ask if you want to save it. Just say Save. Save it as exactly what it's called, untitled whatever, and hit Save. And then it will bring up this page. Now, this is a template page that you can actually use and put content in and to make a website and learn how to do it in the process. Now, watch what happens when you take the lower right corner of your browser and you click on it and you move the browser to the left. Notice how there's always space on either side of the page. Notice how it works to a certain degree, and then at a certain point it stops getting any smaller, and then it just stays what it is, right? Okay? So this is sort of like a little hybrid. It's liquid in that, you know, everything moves, but then when you get to a certain point, it's basically a static layout, right? So if we go back to Dreamweaver and we look in the left-hand side, if we're in the split screen view and we looked over here in the code on the left-hand side, if we scroll up and then down a little bit, we're looking for container. It's line 44 in the code. Line 44 in the code, you see the width is set at 80%. Okay? You can also see under that a little bit, there's something called min width 780 pixels. This minimum width is what makes it so that when you get down to a certain size that it doesn't get any smaller. They're basically saying, okay, yeah, this is a liquid layout, but we're making it a hybrid. We're also making it static in the sense that we don't want this layout to get any smaller than 780 pixels. Now, what's cool about these Dreamweaver templates is they have what are called comments in them. So all of this area in gray, they're instructions to you, the user, right? If you want to use one of these to make a website, then you can read the instructions that are right there and make changes accordingly and edit your website. Now, you may notice that this web page doesn't have a separate style sheet. All of the HTML and the CSS are on the same page, and that's just to make it easy to access it. When you create this, you can choose to make a separate style sheet when you create your template. Okay, so let's see. Let me check here and see if they've got any at all that are just pure liquid. No, they look like they're all percentages like that. Okay. So anyway, that is the basic introduction to the liquid setup. Now, if I wanted to make a page that was completely liquid, right? It was sort of responsive in a sense. I could make one, and I could just use percentages instead of actual pixels. So I'm going to make one very quickly. You guys don't have to go along with me. In fact, you probably don't want to because I'm going to probably go pretty fast. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a new page, a blank page. I'm going to say File New, HTML Layout None. And I'm going to create essentially a blank HTML page, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my CSS style at the top of the page, and I'm going to put my divs right here between the body tags, just so it's all in one place so it's easy to see. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a div called a container. And notice I'm hand coding all this instead of using Dreamweaver's drop-in features. And it's just because I've done it for a long time, so it's like anything you do for a long time, you can do it pretty quickly. So I'm making a container, and notice what I'm going to do. I'm going to build all the structure first. I'm going to build all the rooms, and then I'm going to go up and put the CSS in. And so I'm keeping in mind what it is I'm going to build and how I'm going to decorate it. So I'm going to build a container, right? Inside of that container, there's going to be a header, right? Then there's going to be a main area. So I'll build something similar to what we've done. And then there's going to be a sidebar. And then there's going to be a footer. Okay, so notice that what I'm going to do now is I'm going to highlight everything that's inside of the container, and I'm going to hit my tab key. And the tab key tabs everything over. In other words, indents it to show me that all of those things, the header, main, sidebar, footer, are inside of the container. Now, if I click over here on the right side of my screen, notice we're just going to see this single box here which represents the container. Because right now, none of these things, they're all just empty boxes. They're like Russian dolls that are all exactly the same size. They have no attributes, right? Well, now I want to add my style. So I can go up here to where the head part of my document is. See, here's where it says head and then end head. As long as I'm inside this head section, I can add a tag called style and then add a tag called end style, and that basically allows me to create my own style sheet in here. So now I can say, you know, # container, which means this is the ID that is the container. And I'm going to say width auto. Okay? And auto means it's automatically going to resize to the size of the browser, right? And then I might think about that and go, no, I want the edge of the page to show up. So instead, I'll say I want it to be 80%. Okay, so the width is going to be 80%. My background color is going to be something that's easy to see. It's going to be yellow, right? Now notice that I didn't put a height attribute in here because most websites don't have a height attribute. What that allows the website to do is be auto height, which means the website just expands when you have more content in it. So I've now made a container. I've made the width 80%. I've made the background yellow. Let's see what we're looking at. Okay, that's great. Let's see what else we can do. Let's say, let's see if we do, see what happens if we say margin auto. Okay, margin auto centers it. So now let's look at this web page, what we've got so far. So, hey, looks pretty good, huh? Okay, what's wrong with this picture? Oh, you know what's wrong with this picture is I don't have any content in there. So if I go back to my code view and let's see, I'm inside the container and I say this is my container. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, let's preview it again. Okay, so notice that it has to have content in order to show something. So notice that that's the container right now. It's just big enough for the content. It's auto width or auto height for the content, and that the width is 80% of the browser. So now I grab this browser. Notice as I make it smaller, the width is always 80% of the browser, right? Okay, so now we go back. We'll get rid of the this is my content thing. Okay, now you have to think about height and width differently. Width is really the big thing that screws things up, because you want that to be some kind of percentage so that when people get smaller devices, that can work, right? But for things like the header, the header and the main and the footer, you can put a height on there if you want that is a fixed height, because then it will auto width on the size of the width, but the height can be a set amount that you want. So let's go in here and let's type a new style, and this one is going to be for the header. I'm going to try and put some spacing in here so it's easy for you guys to see, and I'm going to try and do it up at the top of the page so you can see it. So I'm going to type header, and once again, this is my style sheet, but I'm doing it right at the top of my page. And for here, I'm going to make the width the same, which is 80%, so that it's the same as the container. But for the height, I could give it a fixed height like 100 pixels. And for the background color, I'm going to make it a color that shows up really obviously like red. Okay, and then I'm going to go over to my I'm going to go to my HTML code here, and in the header, I'm going to type some text so that we can see it, right? Now, so it says this is the header. Oh, okay, here's the problem. Notice that it's not going all the way across. The reason it's not going all the way across is because I told it to be 80%, and it thinks that's 80% of the width of the container. So I actually have to make it 100%, and then it goes all the way across, right? Now, you guys might be wondering, okay, well, where's the container? Well, the container's behind that, because the container is auto width, so it goes to 80, and it's also auto height, so it just stretched to fill the header, right? Okay, so now we can add a main area in. And I'll scroll up so you guys can see that happening. So now I just go main, and I say width. And for this one, let's do 70%. So we want this to be 70% of the width of the container, which is 80% of the width of the browser. Okay? We want the background color on this to be blue, so it's easy to see. And let's give this a fixed height too, just so we can check out what's happening. So I'll just make this height 400 pixels, and then I'll close that with a curly bracket, right? Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now what we see, well, those are nice colors, aren't they? Primary colors. Pierre Mondrian, anybody know him, right? Okay, so now we see the header going all the way across the container. We see the main area going 70% of the width of the container, and we can see the container back there in yellow showing the other 30%, right, which is not filled right now. Now this main area, we might also want to float this to the left, like we did in ours, so that it stays over there on the left. Now, I'm going to cheat here, as I've been known to do, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this code and reuse it because it's faster, and this is perfectly legit in my world and in all worlds. So what I did was, I'm now making the sidebar, but since I'm going to be using a lot of the same attributes, I just copied the main, pasted it underneath it, gave it the name of sidebar, but now I'm going to say that the width is 30%. I'm going to give it a different color. I'll leave it the same height, but I'll tell this one I want it to float to the right. And now we're seeing something that looks like that. Now before we go any further, let's check this out in the browser. Now notice what happens. We've got a container back there. It's hidden because it's covered by all this stuff, which is only making it so the entire web page can only be 80% of the width of the browser, right? The header is going to be 100% of that 80%, so it's always going to go all the way across, and it's 100 pixels high. It's always going to be 100 pixels high, right? The blue area, which is the main, is only 70% of the width, and it's 400 pixels high. And the green is 30% of the width, and it is 400 pixels high. So watch what happens. As we shrink the whole design, this 70-30 percentage always stays true. You see that? So this is what allows you, and see how it's getting smaller and smaller, but this is what allows you to make a design that is what's called responsive. So that when you see it on a desktop computer like you have there, it can look like this. When you see it on a tablet, it can look like this. And when you see it on a phone, it can look like this. Now remember, responsive also allows you to create multiple layouts that switch when it goes to another format. So we could have this format for the desktop, and then when we get down to this size, we could switch over to a new format that's a little more conducive to tablets, and maybe something that's one column here for phones. Now let's go ahead and put in the last little bit here. So the last thing we're going to do is put in a footer. And what I'm going to do is, once again, I'm going to steal because that's my nature. I'm going to grab the header because the footer is going to be identical to the header in that it's all the same code. Maybe I will give it a different color like gray. Oh, that's really going to, how about purple? And let's put some content in our footer so that that shows up as well. So we're going to go to the code view here, come down to our footer and copy this. This is the header code, put it in the footer and say this is the footer. Oh, and one thing we cannot forget is to clear both, which is to clear the left and the right floats that occurred, right? So now we look at this in Firefox, and there's our website, right? It's just like the setup we did with a static design, except this one is a responsive design. Okay? All right. So, any questions about that? Yes, Louis.
The text never shrinks or anything, huh?
Oh, the text does not shrink.
Does it wrap?
Yeah, it will wrap. Yeah, like if I put enough text in there, as you push this, it will wrap around, right? And pictures, you know, would be moved according to the way the text is going. And we'll see that. We'll put in content, right? Now, I'll go ahead and put this sample web page up on the website. I'll link to it so you guys can download the code. So you'll have this, and you'll also have Dreamweaver's templates to use as examples. If on any of the projects that are coming up, you decide, hey, I don't want to use a static web page, I want to start playing with this responsive stuff, you'll have somewhere to start, and I'll be happy to show you more about this and to help you with any questions you have, like John's question right now.
I got two, actually.
Oh, no, you only get one.
No, I got two. One is, for the header and the footer, you had to put content in it, but you didn't have to just for it to see it. How come you didn't have to put content in the main or the sidebar?
Well,
What's the difference?
let's see. It's probably, I can probably get away with this. It was just when I was building it,
Oh, okay.
in order to see it, I needed to put something in there. But I think that now that it's built, you can still see it with no content in it. So that was just so I could actually visualize it and show it to you guys. But now that all the numbers are in there, it's showing up.
Now my second question is more of a general one. How does it do with code and stuff like that? Because as you're building it and you know something's not working right, like when you do regular software stuff, you usually put a symbol or something in front of a set of code so that you don't see that. You know, so in other words, you can take a piece of code out that you suspect might have problems.
Right.
Is there a way to do that?
Yes, there is.
Or,
Yes, there is. And what it is, it's called commenting out code. So let's say that, for example, that I thought there was a problem with this footer, and I wanted to comment it out. I didn't want to delete it, but I wanted it to disappear. I could highlight the section. In Dreamweaver, I can go over here to this left-hand side, these little icons in the code window. I can click on this one that looks like a cartoon talk bubble, and I can click Apply HTML Comment. And what you'll see is that this area gets grayed out, right? Now when we go look at this, there no longer is a footer, right? And of course, to bring that back in, I simply highlight it, and I click the talk bubble under the first one, which is called Remove Comment, and it gets rid of that, and now our footer's back, right? Now you can do the same with the CSS. It's just a slightly different kind of comment. Let's say I wanted to get rid of the footer code because I thought there might be an error in there. I can click on this talk bubble again, but this time I come down to the second comment, this one with the slashes and the stars. That's the kind of comment you use on a CSS style sheet. If I click on that, it gets rid of the footer style. So the footer is still there, it just doesn't have a height or a background color, and so we can't see it. The actual footer is still part of the HTML document, but because it has no attributes, it doesn't show up. The second I highlight this and click on the no comment, In other words, getting rid of the comment, the footer comes back. Or, like I said, the footer style gets applied. And those comments are incredibly useful. In fact, that's what I was using earlier tonight.
to block
I
it
had
out.
I had written all the code in advance. I had commented out all the stuff, and as I showed you each piece, I uncommented it so that it became active. Okay. Other questions? Okay. All right. That's it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening. Please do read chapter 7 in the book, which is, I believe it's lists and tables. Let me go in there real quick. Working with text, lists, and tables, right? You guys will learn some cool things about text. We've already talked about lists a little bit, and you'll learn when tables can be used, all right? So let's look at our syllabi here. I want to see when our next project is coming up. Let's see, beginning Dreamweaver web design, C5. Okay. 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 Looks like we're just, next week we're going to be continuing to work through HTML and CSS. The week after that is, of course, spring break. And then after that, we're going to come back and give you this project here. Now, what it looks like I missed something on my syllabus here. Oh, no, there it is. Okay. So what it is when you come back from spring break, I'm going to assign you project 2, which is to create a 3-page website. Now, I'm only going to give you 1 week to do that, and we'll talk about it next week, which is the week before spring break. I think what I'll do is I think that next week I'll actually give you the paper that has the project 2 specs on it. So if you want to start working on it here, I don't want you to have to work over spring break, but at least you can work on it next week, and then you'll have a couple weeks to do it instead of just 1. And basically what it's going to be is making a 3-page website instead of 1. And so you're going to expand and put more content in. But I'd also like you to consider working with some of the things we're learning about, like making your own horizontal navigation bar, considering using maybe some kind of a responsive, auto width design like we did today, and things like that. So once again, keep up with your reading. Next week, I will give you the assignment sheet for project 2. You'll have several weeks to work on it, and you'll get a spring break in there as well. Yes?
Photoshop?
Thank you. One last thing before I cut you guys loose. I'm just going to tell you that this is like the tip of the iceberg, and then we'll go more into it in a later class. But the program Photoshop, which is an amazing program, you are able to make websites in Photoshop. You can make a whole design, including the navigation bars and everything, and then you can designate specific areas for buttons and for a main area and a footer. And then you can hit a button, and Photoshop will cut up all the images and will write HTML code, and will create a whole website that you can open in Dreamweaver, right? And it's brilliant, right? But what I'm going to tell you about that is not the way that I think modern web designers recommend making websites. It's a great thing. It's a great way to do it, to create what's called a mock-up, which is a working version of what a website would look like. But as you've seen here, or I should say here, the actual coding of a website, right, can be much more sophisticated than something that Photoshop could do. For example, the first website that you guys made was a static website, right? It was kind of a boring, website, right? Photoshop can only make static websites because in Photoshop, you make a website, you say it's 960 pixels wide. You don't say it's 80% of the width, right? So by definition, any website you make in Photoshop is going to be a static website with a fixed height and a fixed width, right? That's not the way most websites are made. Most websites today are made to be responsive, which means they have an auto width, and they have an auto height, which means they expand or contract to fill with, with the content that's in there. So by definition, Photoshop can only make a shoebox website, right? Whereas you can hand code a website that can be any size, width or height, and fit every device. Okay? So that's my 2 cents on the Photoshop websites. Yeah.
So how does on a responsive website, how does the image, like our header, respond to that?
Okay. So what you can do with a responsive website is you can also make what are called responsive images. And the bottom line there is you just make more than one image. Okay? So let's say that you want to make a responsive website and you have your header image go all the way across, right? You make 3 images. You make a header that's, really big for PCs. You make a header that's as wide as the widest tablet, and you make a header that's as wide as the widest phone. Then you put in your code, when somebody shrinks the browser to 760 pixels, bring in the tablet header image, right? When it gets down to 600, bring in the phone image. So it's basically like having all these backup images that get swapped out when you change size, right? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Can we look at the calendar again?
Yeah.
What's today's date? I feel like your date's on that.
You feel like my dates are a host? Well, they're not because, see, we're missing a week here. This is spring break. Okay? And so what I said was,
Oh, so on the 11th it says no class next, okay.
yeah, it says no class next week, spring break.
Okay,
So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the assignment next week so you'll have several weeks to work on
okay.
it. Okay. You guys are free to go. Thank you so much for your patience.
Thanks for showing up.